Morning, everyone. Welcome to this presentation.
Hello. Welcome to our presentation on HDPE piping, its uses, where it can be used, where it can't be used, and how to do the correct assembly and manufacture of the components into a plumbing system. As this is an overview into HDPE and where it's used, we'll be dealing on both topics here. It is for drainage and piping, and the pipe to keep it straight. High pressure piping. This starts from a PN4, goes all the way up to PN40, and speciality pipes can be made as well. You'll note that the thickness is a lot heavier, and the pipe in for the bigger bore is made in straight lengths. For plumbing installations, HDPE is the ideal product in that it has so many versatile properties and is abrasive resistant. It also resists most acids and is very long lasting. It can take extreme abuse where the pipes can be dropped or it can be virtually ridden over by a vehicle, and after a period of time they'll come back into their shape. HDPE can be manipulated by heating, and once the heating process is finished and it cools down, it will try and go back to its original state. Basic jointing methods of HDPE on the low pressure side on drainage is that we have various types of joints. We have a butt weld joint.
On the butt weld joints, as you can see, that the joints can go below the ring seal socket, below the expansion socket, below the union, and of course in straight lengths of pipe.
We have an expansion socket, a ring seal socket, a union coupler, an electrofusion joint, a stainless steel coupling for joining unlike pipes, so PVC to HDPE and cast iron to HDPE. Over here you can see an example of an extension socket. Note the fixed point that is fitted into this band. That is to ensure that the fixed point is kept in one place and that the pipe is able to expand up and down due to expansion and contraction.
So the expansion contraction is quite an issue with HDPE, especially in your main lines. And you'll find that on the general rule of thumb is that you'll have 1 degree will create 1 millimeter or 1 degree change in temperature will have an effect of 1 millimeter per meter of pipe. So if your temperature change is 20 degrees, you're going to have a 20 millimeter movement in your pipe. We're going to move on to the butt welding.
We're going to run through the basics of joining HDPE drainage pipe, and Zoran will take us through that process.
Hi, my name is Zoran. I want to show you our method of joining HDPE. Particularly, we're going to do the butt weld. First of all, I would like to explain something about the machine, because we find lots of people are not very familiar with the machine. Each and every part of the machine is adjustable. HDPE expands and contracts a lot. If you leave the pipe in the morning, you set your machine. You don't need to use any force. You do 2 fingers, you can close them and it's secure in the pipe clamp. Adjustable pipe supports for different diameters of the pipes. We're going to do 1 butt weld. Most important is your pipe support with your right hand, hold the pipe on the pipe support, clamp it. Now, each and every HDPE part and the fittings, as soon as they leave the factories, they oxidize. We have to remove oxidation of the pipe. Using the planer, we're going to remove the layer of oxidation. Now, your planer, remove layer of oxidation. Check your part. Most of the guys, they're cutting the part with a hacksaw blade, which you will never be able to cut it 100% straight. Grab the planer. Check the lining. Still little planing. It's not only removing the oxidation. If we're joining two pieces of part with the junction one side and the bend. We have to get the right side. Then we're using the fader just to get the dimension. Heat it up. Why we have to heat it up? HDPE is made out of oil. Heating up, we're releasing all the molecules. Heating up, everybody's saying is we're welding the part. We're not welding the part, we're preparing the part to be welded. In the book, you got dimensions and the heating up time, which is most important part of doing the butt weld. This particular one is 110. We have to keep it 63 seconds. You don't have to pressurize it. We want that part to touch the hot plate. When they touch the hot plate, we want to soak the heat into the part. In the beginning, everybody should use, and everybody's got cell phone with a stopwatch. Just first couple of welds you do with your stopwatch until you remember, and I promise you, as soon as your 63 seconds is up, your eyes is going to go onto the hot plate. You're going to see the size of the bead. Somebody said matchstick, but normally it's half of the wall thickness of the pipe. In the application technique book, do you have a columns when it says heating up time until full pressure is applied? It's very important to know why somebody put that in the book. When you take the hot plate out, if you push it hard and quickly, what we're going to do, we're just going to push all the metal part out, and we're going to just weld to the whole part of the part. If that weld is not done properly, in time, expanding, contracting, it's going to break eventually. When you pressurize it, welding and cooling time is much as important as the heating up time. When we heat it up, all the molecules are free. When we pressurize it, as it's cooling down, all the molecules getting together and forming one longer piece of part. This particular part, 110, cooling time, welding and cooling time is 5 minutes. Don't force the cooling time. As soon as you pour the water, try to cool it down quickly. What's going to happen? All the molecules, they're going to stop. They're not going to join together. And that's, well, it's not done.
The next method of jointing we're going to look at is the butt welding by hand. And John will run us through that process and also tell us where we can and can't weld by hand.
Everybody is asking, can you weld HDPE pipe by hand? Yes, you can. Obviously not pressure pipe, but base pipes, we can weld it by hand. And we can weld it up to 75 maximum. The reason is you have to apply the pressure. If you're holding 110 pipe, obviously first you can't hold it. Then you have to have a constant pressure for 5 minutes. The pressure is much higher. Process is exactly the same. When you cut the part, you have to remove the layer of oxidation. Clean it inside. Now, as we said on the machine, you don't have to apply any pressure. Just hold the part against the hot plate just to make sure the part is touching hot plate equally. When you hold it, try to hold them in the same line. When you start your welding, it's much easier to line it up. Obviously, with the smaller parts, this particular one is 63, we have to hold it 40 seconds. Which all the timing you can find in the gathering application technique book, and look at it on the page 55. Same applies to the hand welding, exchange time or time until full pressure is applied. Then you pressurize it until you can see the bead forming. You have to hold it for 4 minutes. And please don't try to blow. Put the water on. Cooling time is 4 minutes.
So pretty much today was the butt welding and the use of the various couplings that we have. As I was saying earlier, is that the expansion and contraction is a real issue with HDPE. And the reason that you can weld smaller pipes by hand is that they're normally not in the very long runs where they're under extreme pressure and change of length. 110 definitely is you have to make sure you apply all of the right pressures on when you're doing the weld to make sure that they do not come apart due to a poor weld. So I think just looking at the different types of joints and particularly changing different materials. So between HDPE and PVC or HDPE and cast iron, you can obviously use an SSN or a stainless steel coupling to do a connection. But what is really important then is you need to make sure that on either side of that is that you've secured the pipe that it cannot move. So you have to create that rigid installation. Otherwise, what happens is that each time you get hot water coming through the line, the pipe wants to expand and contract. And eventually, as you'll find, is that the pipe will just push its way out of the SSN. Using a rubber ring socket is also an acceptable method of joining HDPE to other products. But again, make sure that you restrain the joint from moving. The use of HDPE, it's the most amazing product, and it's often abused because people don't understand how to use it properly and join it. The HDPE can be used for drainage underground, also to soffits and to walls, so for your soil and vent piping. It's UV stabilized in that it has, when they go through the manufacture process, they add soot to it, so it can be used on the outside of a building. And again, is that obviously the sun and the heat and the change in temperature affects the length of the pipe, so it's important to take that into consideration when putting it in. And then I think the most important thing in the welding of the pipes and where we see so many failures is to make sure that you don't try and rush any of the processes of the weld. Make sure that your heating time is correct. Make sure that you've prepared the pipe correctly. Remove the oxide layer. Once the heat is soaked in, don't slam the two pipes together because, as Zoran says, you'll just push out all of the molten plastic. And then you have two cold faces that will weld. And then, of course, the cooling is the most important part because that's when all of the molecules then start to relax and come back together. And they actually pull each other in, and that way you get the solid joint. Great, thanks very much for having me.